Hi, I'm Frank McDonough from the Arboretum of Los Angeles County. They originated in the drug culture of medieval times, and yet you wouldn't stop. You wouldn't even think to stop to take your kids there nowadays. What are these things with the somewhat questionable origins? Well, we'll take a look at that and a lot of other stuff here on Gardens of California, where we look at the history, the community, the technology, and the possibility of your California garden. We're live and online, and that means that you can call me at any time at 1-800-339-1193. It's 1-800-339-1193 if you have a plant question, you want to discuss the lecture, or you have something that you want to talk about in your garden. You have some strange and unusual plant that you can't figure out what it is, give me a call, 1-800-339-1193. We're also online live, and so you can go to dominguezonline.csudh.edu and watch us live and interact with us by asking questions through the interactive interface, and I'll see them right here, just like a semi-chat room, so to speak. So if you are in the class, by the way, you have received your midterm exam, and you have until the 28th to get those back to me, to get those finished, and I will be looking at those tomorrow. I haven't looked at any of them yet. I just published the exam several days ago. Haven't looked. I don't know how you guys are doing. So far, you've been doing great. I hope you can keep that up. So if you're in the class and you haven't heard about the midterm, you better get to the website right away. It's there on the website. If you are a regular viewer of the show, you know that we have our What Is It question. And that is a obscure or hard to identify, hopefully, plant or horticultural item. And I ask you to identify what it is. If you get the correct answer, you win my respect, the respect of everybody else watching Gardens of California, and this fine Arboretum mug right here. And that mug, by the way, will hold your favorite botanical drink, like coffee, tea, chamomile, you name it, it will hold it. So let's take a look at what that plant is. Again, if you can guess what this is. Let me know, give me a call, and you will win my respect, the respect of everybody else watching Gardens of California. That's it right there, and take a look at those leaves. Take a look at those leaves right there. Now, I'm looking for the common name or the scientific name, and with this plant, I don't need the species name, just the genus name, and it was the first of the two names. So if you know what that is, give me a call at 1-800-339-1193, 1-800-339-1193. Now, the Arboretum, where I work, is a hub of horticultural activity. We have horticultural clubs, we have horticultural events, we have shows, and we have some types of shows that are just kind of bordering on horticultural and gardening related as well. So let's take a look at this week's calendar and see what's going on at the Arboretum. Well, we have Santa Anita Derby Day. Now, this is not a garden related event, but it is a 5K run walk, and it is a fundraiser. And for more information, just call that number down there, 626-821-4624. And the next event we have coming up is Great Easter Egg Hunt. This is a Easter egg hunt, bring the kids, April 7th, 10 to 2 p.m. And it focuses on natural plant materials. For a lot of the crafts, there'll be crafts there. If you want more information about that, if you want to bring your kids, 626-821-4624 is the number to call. And the next event coming up is the 4th Annual Korean Garden Festival. That's April 14th, 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And of course, there'll be Korean food there. There'll be lots of neat activities. And it's also kind of in celebration of a very unique area at the Arboretum, and that is the area that's dedicated to the new Korean garden. This is going to be the only Korean garden open to the public in the United States. It's the first large Korean public garden in the United States. It's an area that we've devoted to the Korean garden, and they're just gorgeous. There's, if you go to our website, you'll see some mention of Korean gardens there on the website. They're totally unique. They have, they make use of water and they make use of stone much differently than Chinese gardens or Japanese gardens. So if you want more information on that, go to arboretum.org. Plus the one event I do have to mention coming up, I don't have a graphic for it, is the garden show. And our garden show is the first weekend of May. We'll have plant vendors from all over Southern California selling pretty rare plants, stuff you really can't normally buy at your local nursery. We have plant and horticultural clubs, and they'll also be selling plants, including the Pacific Rose Society, who will be selling their plants there as well. So if you want to learn more about the garden show, go to arboretum.org and you will find out more about that garden show. So now today's lecture is going to be talking about botanic gardens. So, but before I go to that lecture, I am going to show you a video that I did. I went down and interviewed my boss, Mark Worms, who's director of the Arboretum, and he talked about he's talking about the Arboretum, and he's talking about the function of the Arboretum in the future, which is fascinating. If you think about botanic gardens, I'm going to talk about botanic gardens more in the lecture. I'm going to be going in depth about botanic gardens and their significance, but botanic gardens are kind of at a crossroads right now, and where we're going to go in the future is a very fascinating topic. Anyway, let's take a look. Here's Mark Worms, director and CEO of the Arboretum, talking about the Arboretum and talking about the future of the Arboretum.
Hello, I'm Mark Worms, CEO of the Arboretum. We're 127 acres of green space and specialty plant collections. We have wonderful collections of bamboos, palms, roses, orchids, and much more. Traveling through the Arboretum is like traveling around the world. There are plants from many different countries, nations, many different climates. As we become more and more separated from nature and from biological processes, which we all are. I grew up going and finding snakes and frogs at the local creek. That doesn't happen to many kids anymore. I grew up tending a vegetable garden every summer. That doesn't happen with many children anymore. People are losing the connection between the land and the food that's produced. People are losing the connection between the land and the clothing that is produced, or any raw material that is produced. And so botanic gardens have to take on some of that role. We have to spread those messages about plants and people, about the environment and people, and about how all of these things tie together. There will always be interest in bringing new plants to botanic gardens and to the Arboretum. However, one of the trends that will occur is that the Arboretum will reach out to the rest of the world as well and try to contribute there. In fact, we already do. We have raised some of the host plants for rare Pacific blue butterflies. We have done other conservation efforts where we have reintroduced plants into the wild or into larger collections. And that will continue. But I believe we'll also find a trend where botanic gardens start funding research on rare and endangered plants, on categorizing or cataloging plants in natural areas and ever decreasing natural areas, so we understand the impact of use on those lands. Information technology, botanic gardens are starting to tie into that. I believe that you'll end up seeing more and more use of websites to deliver basic information, educational messages, information for teachers, information for people, and how they can make wise choices in their lives and in their gardens. There'll be some pretty neat use of video and the web itself in that I believe you'll see more and more sites popping up that say, hey, let's watch this thing bloom, let's watch this thing grow. The Arboretum's tying into that. You'll see us redevelop our website over the next few months, as well as perhaps some new kiosks out in the Arboretum itself over the next few years. Information technology, just like this show. How's the learning going on? Remotely in many cases. We want to be part of that learning process.
Hi, welcome back to Gardens of California. I'm Frank McDonough from the Arboretum of Los Angeles County, and we've just been watching Mark Worms talk about the Arboretum and not only where it is right now, but the future, where the Arboretum's going. In this lecture coming up, we're going to be talking about where Arboretums and Botanic Gardens came from and a little bit about where they're going to, but you'll find it fascinating. The origins of them are in the a drug culture of Europe. I'll talk more about that a little later. I do want to refresh our What Is It? If you are new to Gardens of California or you've just tuned in, the What Is It is a horticultural item or plant that I ask you to guess, and if you guess correctly, you win my respect. You win the respect of everybody else watching Gardens of California, and if that respect wasn't enough, well, you win this fine Arboretum mug here, which will hold your favorite botanical squeezings like coffee, tea, or many other botanic beverages. It'll also hold Diet Coke too, which is not really a botanic beverage. 1-800-339-1193 if you know what this is. I'll give you a hint on this. This is a California native plant. This is a California native plant. That's a big hint. If you know what this plant is, and you want to win that respect and the mug, 1-800-339-1193 is the number to call on that. Now, this lecture is about botanic gardens and where they came from and what use are they of today. What do you think of when you think of botanic gardens? You know, I think of when I was a child going to the Arboretum. I remember seeing all these really strange plants and just, you know, thinking to myself, well, I'd like to work here. Well, it happened. Little did I know. Be careful when you're a kid out there. Be careful what you like, because you may wind up doing it. But the really neat thing about it, there's plants from all over the world. And botanic gardens got their start not so much in the quest for knowledge of plants around the world. They got their start from the drug culture of medieval times. That is the apothecaries. Apothecaries were healers who basically had many medicines, many of them related to plants. And apothecary science, the science of apothecary healing with plants, was based somewhat on the real properties of plants, somewhat on magical properties of plants, but it was big business. And one of the results of that business was that plants were regarded as a source of medicine. And so the first botanic gardens that came about were right after the Dark Ages, when the Renaissance came, and stuff like apothecary medicine and other types of medicines were put under scientific scrutiny, were subject to scientific study. And so the first true botanic garden that was ever built was built in Pisa, Italy. A gentleman named Luca-Gine, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Luca-Gine. He was the first botanist to develop a botanic garden. Now, what made this different than other apothecaries' gardens? Because apothecaries had their own gardens where they grew all of their herbs that they used in their medicines. What was the difference? Well, the difference was the cataloging of the plants. The plants were written down, and Luca developed something very interesting that no other botanic garden had, or apothecary garden had, and that was he would collect plants from all over the world, especially from Italy, where he was based, and he would press these plants on paper and store them for reference further on. One of the big problems with the study of plants up until then was that it was done from memory. People would write things down, they'd describe the plants in the field, and if you decided you want to classify these plants and wanted to go back, you may or may not find that plant. Well, this way, a botanist in the field would press a plant specimen, send it to the herbarium, And if somebody wanted to do more work on that plant, they didn't have to go back out into the field again and waste a lot of money and time. They just went to the herbarium, opened the drawer, took out the dried plant, and examined it. It was a giant leap forward, and it allowed for the development of classification science. Another botanic garden that was a very early on botanic garden and was related to the study of medicine was the Oxford Botanic Garden. Unfortunately, with the Oxford Botanic Garden, something happened there that's happened to a lot of other botanic gardens since, and has been the bane of many of them since they're nonprofit institutions. And that is, the benefactor for the Oxford Botanic Garden plunked down 5,000 pounds at the time, and this was in the 1500s. I'm sorry, 1633, plunked down 5,000 pounds. Now, 5,000 pounds back then was a couple of $1 million. That was a large amount of money. And so what did the University of Oxford, what did Oxford do with that money? Well, they built this huge garden with the beautiful storage areas, beautiful kind of, they weren't greenhouses, they were like orangeries. They built an area for growing plants indoors and out, spent all kinds of money, big thick walls to insulate it from the cold, and guess what happened? They ran out of money and had no money to staff it or keep it up. As a result, the Oxford Botanic Garden kind of creaked along for a while. It suffered because it didn't have any constant funding. It wasn't a standalone. And I mean, that's been a problem with a lot of university botanic gardens, is that they're on the chopping block if there is a cut in funds. So what changed? Well, a couple of things changed. One, Linnaeus, Carolus Linnaeus came on the scene. And Carolus Linnaeus was born in 1707, and he died in 1778. Brilliant man, was based in Sweden, pretty much stayed there most of his life, and he developed a system of classification that was hierarchical. In other words, it was plants, animals, and other living things were classified in ever larger and larger groups. For instance, you'd have a species, and that would belong to a group called a genus, which shared more things in common. And then you'd have that genus would belong to a group called a family, and so forth. And so he came out with two seminal works on this. One was Systema Naturae, and then Systema Plantae. And these were both books describing his classification system. Excuse me. Well, his classification system was revolutionary in that it was extremely easy to use. And one of the ways that he had to classify plants, in fact, one of the most important deductions he made. Now, this is an arbitrary system, by the way. This was an arbitrary system of classification. It wasn't based on any absolute scientific principles. Nowadays, plants are classified by genetics. They sequence the genes, they plate the genes out, they look for patterns in the genes, and they determine that a plant is related to another plant by the closeness of the match of the genetics. It's pretty straightforward, it's pretty reliable, although there are some kinks in the systems that need to be worked out. It's pretty straightforward, and it basically gives you a picture of how the plant is related to other plants, and sometimes how it has evolved that's much clearer than just using visual information alone. But since they had no gene sequencers in Linnaeus' time, he had to develop a system that relied on certain characteristics of the plant that were the least changeable. And Linnaeus was influenced by an Italian botanist who felt that the sexual parts, the flowers, were the parts of the plant that changed the least. And so, and this is before the theory of evolution came about, and it was pretty advanced thinking at the time, and very controversial, actually. People didn't like the idea of classifying plants because of the appearance of their sexual parts. So it was a very controversial idea, but it became more and more accepted, and Linnaeus himself had a lot of students that he sent out into the world to collect plants for him. In fact, if you look at any herbal book, you look at a flora, which is a collection of plants of a certain area, or you look at some of the horticultural books that we have, and you look at all the plants from around the world and what their scientific names are, you'll see that either a lot of them were described by Linnaeus, or they were named after Linnaeus. And this is because Linnaeus sent dozens of students out into the world to collect plants for him. They'd collect the plants, make notes on where they were, and then they'd send the dried pressed plants. Remember, this was new technology, fairly new. It was developed by our botanist, Italian botanist friend, Lucio. He developed a plant press. So all these pressed plants were sent to Linnaeus, and Linnaeus described them, and so his name is attributed to them. He quite thousands of plants, and these were all brought in by his students. So he had a huge influence on the science of botany. He made botany a lot easier to deal with. In fact, let me give you an example of what an old description of a plant would be before Linnaeus. This is a physalis. This is the whole entire name of the plant, and it's also part of the Latin description. And excuse my Latin, it's a dead language, so I can't mispronounce it. Here we go. Physalis annua ramosissima ramus angulosus glabrus folius dentato serratus. That was the name of the whole plant. That's what you'd use if you were a scientist before Linnaeus' time to describe to another scientist what plant you were talking about. This was pretty tough. You had to know a lot of Latin, and you had to be really, really good with your tongue. So you'd just be laughed out of botanist circles if you mispronounced any of these things. Linnaeus made it much easier by adhering to the binomial theory, and that was that most organisms could be described quite well just using the genus and the species name. That was the binomial, two Latin names, and that made things much easier. And that's what we have today, is the binomial system to just to name plants. For instance, Crocus sativa would be the autumn crocus, Crocus sativa. So I'm sorry, that wouldn't be the autumn crocus, that would be the regular crocus. Crocus sativa is two names. Crocus is the genus name, and sativa is the species name. And it makes it a lot easier when botanists are talking about plants, to just use those binomials. Well, Linnaeus heavily influenced a gentleman in England, and this gentleman's name was Sir Richard Banks. And Banks was a advisor to King George III, and King George III really, now Kew Gardens, we're going to talk about the Kew Botanic Gardens. King George III was the main instigator behind, now that's Joseph Banks behind me there. King George III was really into farming. When he wasn't, going completely nuts, he loved farming. And King George III, it really made Kew Gardens, which had before that been more of a pleasure garden or a show garden, made Kew Gardens a botanical institution. And his figuring was that a nation has to support botanical research, because if you could help bring new varieties of plants into cultivation, then you can economically be very strong. And again, this was his love of farming that kind of dictated this. Well, Banks was a very notable scientist. He was one of the members of the Royal Society, which was a society that was dedicated, now remember, this was the Age of Enlightenment in the 1700s, a society dedicated to promoting science in all aspects of life. And Banks went on several collecting expeditions that were quite famous, including the one that Cook did around the world as well. And he was also influential in a lot of other things too. Historically, he was a very interesting character. He's one of the gentlemen that appointed Captain Bligh to his position. But he was a big fan of Linnaeus, and he helped increase the amount of the collection of the Kew Gardens, and he would go on these expeditions around the world and collect plants, and he actually helped make botany kind of sexy. He was both derided and lauded in the tabloid press of the time as being quite the playboy botanist, and he would go out around the world and collect plants, and he was quite the ladies' man. And this kind of didn't hurt botany at the time, because botany, of course, in most people's minds was not the most glamorous of science. Well, Joseph Banks made it fairly glamorous at the time and helped Kew Gardens along to become what it was. Now, Kew Gardens officially became the official botanic garden of Great Britain in 1840, and that is when it, under the directorship of several very good directors, it made its mission to go out into the world and send botanists out into different parts of the world, bring back plants, and collect these plants for economic good, for scientific good, and for the greatness, of course, of Britain. So we had the Kew Botanic Gardens in Britain, a long history of botanic garden culture in Europe. France had botanic gardens, Sweden had botanic gardens. Many different countries had botanic gardens, and they were considered to be a kind of a sign of class. They were considered to be a high learning institution. You know, you had universities. If you were a country that was on its way, you were a country that was powerful. You had a university that was world class, and you had a botanic garden that was world class. And you collected plants from all over the world, especially from your territories. And this also had a practical aspect in that different plants were able to be identified as far as their medicinal characteristics. But the science of botany at that time was not where it is today. A lot of times when plants were collected, there was no other information collected about them other than where they were collected from and their habitat and a specimen that was sent to the botanic garden. The uses of the plants, the way that the indigenous peoples used the plants, their plants' relationship to the animals around them, these things weren't considered. They weren't considered important. I mean, basically they were out, get the plants, bring them in, get a plant collection going, and we'll work from there. Well, that's changed. And one of the premier institutions that helped change that was the Missouri Botanic Garden. Let me tell you a little bit about the Missouri Botanic Garden. Very unlikely place for a botanic garden, St. Louis, Missouri. Most of the culture and class of America in the time when this place was established, and was established in the 1840s and 50s, most of the culture and class was on the East Coast. The gentleman that started the garden, Charles Shaw, he made his fortune in hardware in St. Louis, and he had come over from England. He had actually imported fine cutlery from England. That's how he made his fortune. And so he, being an Englishman, decided that St. Louis and the Midwest needed some class. They needed some learning. They needed an institution that would befit where they were going culturally. And so he established the Missouri Botanic Garden. And he was looking at the Kew Garden in England as his role model for this garden. So he established it with conservatories, he established it with large collections, a library, and an herbarium, just like the Kew Garden had. And as a result, even though it's not located in the East Coast, where most of the population was at the time, the Missouri Botanic Garden became one of the premier horticultural and botanical institutions in the United States. I'm talking about an institution that has up to 50 PhD botanists out in the field at any one given time. The Missouri Botanic Garden, under the directorship of Peter Raven in the 60s and 70s, decided to concentrate on ethnobotany. Now, ethnobotany was a new twist on botany. Richard Schultes, who was a botanist at Harvard, had developed this field pretty much almost by himself. And what ethnobotany was is the study not only of the plants, but how these plants were being used by the native populations. And it got to the point where ethnobotany was not so much a form of botany as it was a cross between anthropology and botany. And there are just some incredible strides being made in ethnobotany right now and have been for the last 10 to 20 years. And ethnobotany is one of the frontiers now that botanic gardens are looking at. And ethnobotany entails more than just describing the plants, like I said. It requires that the botanist live with the native population for quite some time, gain their trust, and write down and describe the uses that each of these plants have and how they're used, who they're used by, and a little bit about their cultural significance and mythology. And so it's really a fascinating field, and what makes ethnobotany so important right now is that many what are called pre-literate cultures are losing the knowledge that they have passed down from generation to generation by word of mouth. Many tribes, many small groups of peoples in and around the world, people that are in hunter-gatherer-like societies, have been passing down the information regarding the plants' uses of the plants around them from down by mouth, by rote memory from generation to generation. Many of these tribes have people called shamans, or in the old days used to call them witch doctors, which is kind of not a very good way to describe them. Shamans and healers and midwives, these were people that specialized in plant knowledge. They specialized in knowing what the plants in and around the areas that they lived in did, and their use and how to use them. And because this information is passed down from generation to generation, and because Western civilization is such a strong draw for the young of these tribes, they want to go into the city and make their living there, make a better life for themselves. This knowledge is not being passed down, and much of it is being lost. And so there's an imperative, there's a huge push to get this information down on paper and to get it cataloged. And there just aren't enough ethnobotanists to go around. And it's a great, interesting field, and it's really, when you consider the amount of resources that are out there, they could be used in the future. You know, the cures for cancer, the cures for other diseases, and we're not talking just cures, but maybe what they call lifestyle type of plants, you know, soothing teas, plants to eat for social situations, and foodstuffs. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge out there that if this knowledge is not saved by ethnobotanists and others, it's going to be gone forever. And we may never know what these plants can do. So that's the lecture on botanic gardens. We're still going to keep up with botanic gardens. I went around to several botanic gardens about 2 weeks ago and interviewed quite a few people. And I went to the Huntington Botanic Gardens to talk about just this, one of these premises, what the future of botanic gardens are, what's their place. And I talked to the director of the Huntington, Jim Folson. So listen to this. This is a fascinating interview with Jim Folson from the Huntington Botanic Gardens. Gardens, and I'm talking to Robin Cease, who is the manager of visitor education here at the gardens. Robin, this is a beautiful garden. I mean, I'm looking at some of these tulips. I'm just amazed at how gorgeous they are. Tell us a little bit about Descanso Gardens and what sets it apart from other botanic institutions here in Southern California.
Well, we have some major collections that are unique. We have 30,000 camellias. We have 3,000 roses and a wonderful Quercus agrifolia forest. And we also have native section. And we have beautiful display gardens. And we have some really unique things such as lilacs. We have about 350 lilacs that bloom in the spring.
We're here in this beautiful tulip garden, and there's a lot of people around here. This is huge. I mean, how many visitors do you have a year?
We have around 300,000 visitors that visit us each year.
Wow.
And a lot of them come during the spring for our beautiful spring show, because there really isn't any place else more beautiful for spring than here in Descanso.
So this is the spring show right here, all these gorgeous plants.
Beautiful. And it just keeps going, because the next thing will bloom, or the dogwood, and the next thing will be the wisteria, and then you just keep going on and on.
Wow, fantastic. If you were what's your favorite area here?
Actually, the Japanese garden is my favorite place.
Really? And what's so special about the Japanese garden?
Well, it's very peaceful and serene, and we have some wonderful plants there.
On a day like today, you're probably going to be there a couple of times, huh?
Yeah. It's very, we have some beautiful cherries, and we have the acers in there, the Japanese maples, and I guess it looks beautiful every time of the year.
So anytime you come here, you can go to the Japanese garden and get away from the teeming crowds.
Yes.
Ah. great. Thanks, Robin.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Frank McDonough from the Arboretum of Los Angeles County, and that obviously wasn't Jim Folson. I actually switched and made a mistake, and that was supposed to be Robin from Descanso. Let me say a little bit about Descanso Gardens. Fascinating history. Jim Bodie, who was the publisher of what was soon to become later on the Daily News, the Valley Daily News, owned or purchased Descanso Gardens in the 40s and decided to produce all kinds of new camellias and other types of plants. And that's the Descanso Gardens origin. He donated that to the county, and as a result, Descanso Gardens is one of the premier show gardens in Southern California, which is different than a botanic garden because they don't have the same type of resources. But it goes to show you the different types of gardens there are. Now we're going to have the Jim Folson clip. Again, Jim Folson, director of the Huntington Botanic Gardens, and he's going to talk a little bit about the Botanic Gardens and the future of Botanic Gardens and some other stuff. So let's take a look at this interview with Jim Folson. We're here at the conservatory of the Huntington Botanical Gardens. This place is amazing. It's just like if you've seen pictures of the conservatory at Kew or the other great European conservatories. This place looks just like it, and it's humid in here. It's hot, and that's because these tropical plants in here like it that way. I'm really lucky to be here with Jim Folson. Jim, how you doing today?
All right.
Now, what is the difference between a botanical garden and, say, a show garden?
Well, they're not two distinct things, but a botanical garden is all about collecting plants. And the simplest definition for botanical garden would be it is a collection of plants that are labeled and kept track of. Now, that means you could plant it in rows, like an arboretum, or you could plant it in a landscape format, which is what we do.
And what would you say would be the premier collection that you have, and the collection that you're most proud of, the one that you say, hey,
well,
this is what the Huntington
does. It's like choosing
does.
among your children, but the collection that is botanically the most significant is the desert garden. So we have over 5,000 species of succulent plants.
5,000?
Yes.
How long has the desert garden been there?
It's 100 years old this year.
And so it just celebrated its centennial.
We don't know exactly when the birth took place, but we're working on it.
The history of this place is fascinating. Can you give us a little overview and your twist on the history?
Oh, my twist?
Give me your twist. Yeah.
Well, you don't want the total twist.
No, just give me a half twist.
The Huntington Gardens is over 100 years old now. We began building the gardens in 1903, so the lily ponds are 104 years old. And Mr. Huntington bought the property. It was the largest remaining orange grove in the Pasadena area. And he paid a good chunk of money for it in 1903, $250,000. But it was 500 acres. Over time, he built his empire, his land development empire, and shrank it and built it and shrank it. But this core, which was his estate, remained intact. When he died in 27, he left behind a full garden, about 80 acres of landscaped gardens, a real incentive to collect. And he was a collector of plants, books, and in the end, art. So he felt that collections, when used for the benefit of people, could yield great value for society. He was hoping to build something of what would become culture in Southern California. And so plants were part of that from the start. The collections continue to have been built over the years, and we're trying to realize all the value we can from the collections, because his goal was that an institution was not to be measured by what they had, but what they did with it. So product was always primary to him. So what we're trying to do is take these wonderful collections that have been built over the years and turn them into something that the entire community feels is of great value. Not just the community, but perhaps even a larger community. So what can we do with these collections to make it worth maintaining an institution like this?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
One last question.
Sure.
How come you're not sweating?
I grew up in the South. I was born in
That'll do it.
August in southeastern Alabama. I just
This
have
is
a
nothing.
different. I have a different physique. This is glorious to me.
Hi, welcome back to Gardens of California. I'm Frank McDonough with the Arboretum of Los Angeles County, and this is the 3-credit college class where we look at the history of the community, the technology, and the possibility of your California garden. I have my what is it there for all of you out there who are trying to guess. Let's take a look at that. And the hints so far on this have been it is a California native. It is, it's low growing. So what other hints can we have on this? Let's take a look. Its common name sounds like a plant that is producing very beautiful, sweet-smelling blooms this time of year. And this also produces blooms like it, but the plant is not the same as far as the flowers don't smell as good as the plant that I'm talking about. And I'll give you the name of the plant that this is somewhat named after. The common name contains the name of this plant, and that is the lilac plant. By the way, the lilacs are blooming right now at Descanso Gardens. They're just fantastic. So the common name of this, if you want to guess, it contains lilac, but it's not the entire name. You can't come here and call and say, is that a lilac? Because it's not. This is not a type of lilac. Its common name contains the word lilac, and it's a California native. Do you know what that is? Give me a call at 1-800-339-1193, 1-800-339-1193. And of course, you'll win my respect and the respect of everybody else watching Gardens of California. Now, we're going to be going to our mailbag in just a little bit. If you have any plant-related questions, gardening questions, you have a pest, you don't know what's going on with your tree, things are dying, give me a call at 1-800-339-1193. I am open for any and all gardening questions right now. That's 1-800-339-1193. I'm open for any and all gardening questions. So, we're going to go to a break now, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the questions I've received throughout the week in the mailbag, and we'll also be looking at plants that will make your garden look like a botanic garden. These are plants that will make your guests, your friends, your neighbors look over your fence and go, wow, I can't believe that. That person must be a botanist. So we'll be looking at plants that you can plant that will make your garden look like a botanic garden, and also the mailbag, and that's coming up after the break here on Gardens of California.
You've been on campus today visiting some of the classes and talking to some of our students. I understand that's...
It's an astonishing experience for me, Doctor, because again, I haven't been here for 30 years. I both taught for a while here as a graduate student and pursued my graduate studies, and then I left in 1971. So it's been exactly 30 years, and it's a phenomenal difference. I mean, in my day, there were tents and trailers, and today it's a thriving, bustling university campus with all kinds of growth before your eye, and it's amazing to me.
Tonight, I just want to thank you very much for coming on the show and coming back to campus to meet with our students.
It's a pleasure to come home again.
Enrich your life. Increase your earning potential. Cal State Dominguez Hills offers a master's degree in humanities. With a focus on the cities of the world, this master's degree can be earned in as little as 5 semesters. Evening classes are available for your convenience. Why wait? Call 310-243-3636. That's 310-243-3636.
I basically took the distance learning course because I'm trying to get my California credential. I'm an out-of-state teacher. It's very convenient. I took last semester the health course from Joanna Chase, and I found that to be to my liking. I could study, relax, do it casually in the confines of my home.
I took one of the distance learning classes basically for convenience. It was nice to be at home in the mornings and watch it at home. Or, if it didn't work out that way, I could tape it and kind of watch it at my own leisure.
Well, I took the distance learning course because it's, I'm able to watch the videos anytime I want at my convenience, and it's easy to do that. I can watch it at home or either at the media center. And I would recommend this to a friend.
Welcome back to Gardens of California. I'm Frank McDonough with the Arboretum of Los Angeles County, and this is a 3-credit college class that looks at the history of the community, the technology, and the possibility of your California garden. I'm going to be going to the mailbag in just a little bit. I do have a phone caller, so let's take that phone call. Yes, caller, go ahead. Nive from Pasadena, how you doing?
I wanted to know, I have problems with the orchids. I have the cymbidiums
Okay.
that they grow real well and I flower every year for me.
Mm-hmm.
But phalaenopsis, they will not flower for me, and I've done everything in the book.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a question, Nives. Where are you growing these phalaenopsis?
I have them in the living room facing north.
Okay.
And I think there's plenty of light.
Okay. All right.
And I feed them every other week.
Every other week, okay. Well, let me, I've just talked to somebody about this. In fact, one of the questions that I'm going to do a little later on in the mailbag has to do with just this kind of an issue. A lot of times when you bring an orchid like a phalaenopsis into a house, the house is way too dry for that orchid. And so you have to take steps to increase the humidity. And one of the best ways to do that is to make a humidity tray. And that is you take a pie tin or a ceramic tray that's about 1 to 2 inches tall, and you put gravel in that, and then you half fill that with water. Well, the moist gravel evaporates water around the plant, and so you have a high level of humidity around the plant, and this stimulates it to grow. So you should try, have you tried a humidity tray yet?
No.
Okay, that's the first thing you should do. Number 2, a north-facing window, even though it appears bright to you, is really not bright enough for the phalaenopsis. You might want to try having that set back from an east window or a south window. You don't want them right in the windows where the sun's going to be right on their foliage. You want them set back somewhat from that window, and that will give it enough light. Most orchids really require quite a bit of light in a house. They're not dark area plants. They're not like, say, pothos or philodendrons. Those plants can tolerate low light. Orchids, in order to thrive, in order to bloom, you need to have them in an area that's pretty bright. Now, there's one other little trick I'm going to tell you about with phalaenopsis, and that is to get a phalaenopsis, or any orchid for that matter, most any orchid, to bloom, they need a little bit of a temperature differential. In other words, they need to be put in an area where the temperature is a little lower than they are normally used to for 2 weeks to 3 weeks, and then brought back into their normal temperature. Now, for your phalaenopsis, you might want to take your phalaenopsis to an area of the house that stays around 65 degrees or isn't heated, and keep them there for a few weeks, and then bring them back into your well-lit area that has the normal temperature of the house around the 72 degrees, and that'll help them bloom too. Also, one more thing. When you have a flower spike, when you brought these in from, say, the nursery, and the flowers are all gone, you don't want to cut that spike all the way down to the bottom. You want to cut that spike about 2 nodes down from the top of the flower spike. 2 nodes. That's, for some reason, they like to bloom much faster and much better on a spike like that than if you take the spike all the way down. Now, they will bloom if you take the spike all the way down, but sometimes it takes them longer to do that. They have to develop a new flowering spike underneath the foliage and have to send it up. And it takes more energy, it takes more time. So I hope that helps. Go give those a try.
Well, I will try.
Okay, great.
To do what you said. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Bye.
You bet. 1-800-339-1193. 1-800-339-1193. If you are just tuning in, we have our What Is It plant, and that is a plant I asked you to identify And if you identify it, you win my respect and the respect of everybody else watching Gardens of California. This is the plant right here. I'd like to thank Burkhardt Nurseries for the loan of this and other plants used in the Gardens of California. That's it right there. Now, I mentioned it's a California native. Its common name has lilac in it. Its common name isn't lilac, but it contains the word lilac. And also, this is a very common plant on the hillsides here above Los Angeles, especially on the north-facing slopes of the hillsides of the mountains. And around spring, just around this time of year, you'll see these blooming on the hillsides, and just gorgeous. Now, this is a variety of the plant that's lower and is what's called variegated. So this is a cultivar of the plant. You wouldn't find this in the wild. Plants like this don't survive in the wild because they don't produce enough energy to compete with other plants. But in captivity, in your garden, they do survive quite well. So what is that plant? If you know what it is, call 1-800-339-1193. That's 1-800-339-1193. Now, on to the mailbag. I work at the Arboretum basically as what's called a botanical information consultant. I mean, that's a pretty big $5 word position name, botanical information consultant. What I do during the week is I take plant questions from private individuals, from government, from industry, and I answer them. I go around, we have a library, I look up things in our library, I have things that I know from personal experience, and I also have the vast resources of the internet as well. And as a result, I'm able to answer quite a few of these questions. Now, I'm going to go over with you some of the most interesting questions that I've had over this last week, and it's been quite a week for questions. First question that came in was from Sam in Covina, and it goes like this. One of our oak trees at our condo community is dropping a lot of leaves right now. Could that be from overwatering? We are very concerned about it. Thanks. Well, oak trees drop leaves certain times of the year anyway. One of the times they tend to drop leaves is when they are flowering. Oaks produce male and female flowers. The male flowers are produced first and female shortly afterwards. The male flowers are called catkins. They look like furry ropes or furry worms hanging down from the tree. The female flowers produce acorns. When the oak tree is flowering, it uses a lot of its energy for that flowering. You know, it has to produce the tissue of the flowers, has to produce the acorns. That energy is not returned back by those organs, by the acorn and the male catkin. In other words, what's happening is the tree is basically spending a bunch of its energy to reproduce. It's taking a gamble. It's taking the energy it would normally use to survive, and it's instead putting that energy into reproduction. So it's taking a chance. And so to mitigate its energy losses, what it does is it drops leaves. And why it drops the leaves is it takes the energy from those leaves. The leaves store energy in the form of sugars, and it translocates that energy to the flowering parts of the tree. So that way the tree uses energy it already has for that flowering. And also sugars come from the bark as well. So when this happens, those leaves drop. And so during certain times of the year when the tree's flowering, you'll get leaves dropping. Also when the tree is under stress, you'll get leaves dropping as well. And one of the things that we've had recently is somewhat of a drought. We've had a very low amount of rain for the last year or so. And as a result, you're going to see trees like oaks dropping leaves in response to drought stress as well. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, something to keep an eye on. One other thing, and I talked to these, I called this gentleman up and I asked him a few more questions about the situation. They do not have a lawn underneath the tree. They have cleared the area out many years ago and they've left it open. That's good. Unfortunately, if you have a lawn or a lot of landscaping that requires a lot of water and you have that planted underneath an oak tree, that can cause the oak tree to suffer from what's known as armillaria root rot. Now, armillaria is a funny fungus. I have mentioned it several times before. It attacks only oaks that are under stress. And having a lawn underneath an oak tree increases the amount of stress on it. And it does that because all that constant watering that the lawn receives underneath the oak tree encourages another fungus that's kind of a gateway fungus for the armillaria, and it's called Phytophthora. And Phytophthora weakens the tree by rotting the roots. The roots are what help bring nutrition to the tree. The tree basically starves to death, and when it's on its last legs, the armillaria comes and finishes the job. Apparently, armillaria has been here with the oaks for centuries, for thousands of years, and its job might be to clean up oak trees that otherwise wouldn't decay very well in our arid climate. In other words, if we didn't have armillaria, we'd be 10 stories deep in dead oaks because these oaks would not decay rapidly enough to, as opposed to, say, on the East Coast where there's plenty of rain, these oaks don't decay rapidly enough. So the armillaria helps decay them by eating them from the inside out. And it tends to only, in nature, it only affects very stressed trees or very old trees, trees that are on death's door. So what happens is people put these lawns around their trees, they rot the roots out, the trees start suffering, they're malnourished, and they basically bring their trees to death's door for armillaria to take care of it. So anyway, just keep an eye on that tree, and if the leaf drop stops, don't worry about it. If it continues on, you might want to contact an arborist and see what's going on. I had another call from Lori, and Lori is from Monrovia, and Lori says that she was looking for clumping bamboos for a privacy screen for her neighbors. Now, bamboos are getting more and more popular as privacy screens. And the reason that they're so popular is that they can produce some pretty nice height on them fairly rapidly compared to other plants. One of the things you have to watch out for if you decide to use bamboo as a privacy screen is you have to watch out for running bamboo. And you have to make sure that if you're going to use the bamboo, it's not going to outgrow the area. And there are two kinds of bamboo. There's running and there's clumping. The clumping bamboo, pretty much just like it sounds, it stays to itself. It does spread, but very slowly, and it's nowhere near the type of problem that you'll have with running bamboo. Running bamboo produces what are known as rhizomes. These rhizomes spread underground to increase the size of the plant. They can run underground through to your neighbor's yard and increase the size of the unwanted bamboo in your neighbor's yard. That's why it's very important when you're buying bamboo for a screen to make sure that if you're going to use runners, that you have plenty of room for them and a root barrier installed. And if you're not going to use runners, use clumpers. Now, one of my favorite clumpers to use is the Japanese timber bamboo, Bambusa old hamii. It grows to 20 to 30 feet, very sturdy bamboo, very good for most areas here in Southern California. You don't want it in too cold of an area, but most areas will do just well with it, just fine with it. One drawback is it's fairly expensive. It can cost you several $100s for each plant, but well worth it. And if you want to see a really great planting of this type of bamboo, they have it out in front of the Japanese art gallery that's that's part of the County Art Museum. The Japanese, I think it's called the Japanese Pavilion. They have beautiful clumps of Bambusa old hamii there. So if you want to take a look at what that bamboo looks like, go to the County Art Museum, go to the Japanese gallery, and take a look at the bamboos that are surrounding that, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Really nice bamboo, very good screen, although a little pricey. Speaking of orchids, I had a question about an orchid called a Miltonia. Now, Miltonias aren't that common. They look a little bit like a Phalaenopsis. The flower shape is different. They almost look like a cross between a Dendrobium and a Phalaenopsis. But Miltonias are a wholly distinct genus and species of orchids. And Miltonias are kind of tough. Now, I'm seeing them being sold in different places like Trader Joe's and other nurseries, and they're a little bit difficult. And anyway, Joel from Monrovia, Joel was from Pasadena, called in and asked why his Miltonia was not flowering. And so we went over a lot of the basics like I was just talking about with the Phalaenopsis, in that they do require some humidity, they do require feeding, but you have to be very careful with the feeding. They're a little sensitive. You want to go with a little less than the regular dose of orchid food. And as far as light goes, they do like good light in the house, but you have to be careful. You don't want them in too bright of an area because that can affect them also. So they're a little pickier than the Phalaenopsis, but the same cultural aspect applies. You want to bring up that humidity around the plant. Very important to bring that humidity up around the plant. I have another, this inquiry was from Mary Maverick. And Mary Maverick writes, we've tried a few things to get whitefly under control on several 10-foot podocarpus shrubs on the north side of a house in mid-city Los Angeles. We've hosed them repeatedly. We've pruned heavily to increase air circulation as well as accessibility for hosing and spraying. And we've sprayed with insecticidal soap. They still return to heavy populations very quickly. Are we missing something about how frequently to repeat the procedure and to keep them under better check? And she added that they don't seem to be damaging the podocarpus. We're mostly concerned about maintaining a host plant with plenty of whiteflies. In other words, they don't want the whiteflies around to affect other plants. And we don't want to see them spread to other susceptible plants in the garden. Well, Mary, what you want to do on that is the next step up from soap and the next step up from spraying with high pressure stream of water, which is called syringing in the trade. The next step up is to try horticultural oil. Now, horticultural oil is a type of petroleum distillate. In other words, it originates from petroleum. It's been used for centuries. It's a very light oil, and the way it works is it gloms onto the insect, it smothers the insect, it also helps dissolve parts of the insect, and so it kills them several different ways. It also smothers the insect's eggs, and so it's a very effective control for a lot of insects that are stationary, that stay on the plant, that don't go anywhere. It doesn't work very well for insects that are mobile, things like beetles and plant bugs, lygus bugs. Works great for different types of whitefly, works somewhat for psyllids, not extremely well. It works very good for aphids. And so what you want to do is spray this on the plant, both top and bottom, and it should do the job. It should last a lot longer than some of the other stuff you tried, and it should be more effective. Now, you have to be really careful with oil sprays because oil sprays can harm plants if you spray them when it's really hot. In other words, if it's above 80 to 85 degrees, you might want to put off that spraying until it gets a little cooler, maybe in the evening, or you want to do your spraying in the early morning. Because if you spray the oil when it's really hot, it can damage the plant as well, and you don't want to do that. So try the horticultural oil. That should do the job just fine, and it's pretty simple to use. It's pretty safe on the environment, and it should do the job just fine. I also had a call from a gentleman in Lake Elsinore, and he asked about planting iceberg roses in Lake Elsinore. Now, iceberg roses are great roses. They are a type of rose called a floribunda. They're anywhere from 3 to 4 feet tall. They have a very bush-like appearance to them. In other words, they're not scraggly like some of the tea roses. They actually have a nice solid appearance when they have leaves on them. And they can be used in landscape not only as a rose, but as a hedge as well, somewhat of a hedge. So they're really neat that way. And they bloom constantly. They have a very long blooming period. And he wanted to know if they're going to work there in Lake Elsinore. Well, one of the things, they will work in Lake Elsinore. You're in the zone for these roses. But one of the things you have to keep in mind is that these roses are going to grow a little smaller, and the roses themselves are going to be a little smaller because Lake Elsinore tends to get a lot of wind. And that wind has a drying effect on the plant. That drying effect causes the plant to grow a little bit more. It grows tougher, and it'll put on smaller leaves, and the buds will come out a little smaller. So the plant will be just a little smaller, and that might not be a bad thing because it'll look a little bit more compact. So that was from a gentleman in Lake Elsinore, wanted to know if those roses would grow there. And finally, I had a call from a lady in San Marino, a gal in San Marino, and she had just had a tree installed. And the tree was, I do believe it was a liquid amber, and it was installed in the middle of the lawn, and it had a root barrier on it. Now, root barriers are kind of controversial. Root barriers may or may not work. And let me tell you one thing about root barriers. The only time you really should even consider a root barrier. Now, root barrier, just to explain it, is usually made of plastic. It's installed anywhere from 1 to 3 feet away from the tree in a circle. And in theory, it keeps the roots from going out into other areas of your garden and creating havoc and destruction. That's the theory. Unfortunately, they don't work as good as the theory. A lot of times the roots will grow over the root barriers. They'll grow through cracks in the root barriers, and you'll still have a problem with the roots. Another thing about root barriers, if you don't need to use them, don't. Root barriers keep the root mass of the tree small. They keep the structural roots that help keep the tree up small, and as a result, the tree has a better chance of failing later on in the wind. So, don't use root barriers, and should never use root barriers on really large, tall trees for the same reason. Root barriers will keep structural roots from developing. They'll keep the tree up, and eventually you could have a problem with the tree failing. So the only time you really want to use root barriers is if you're planting something next to concrete or right next to a sidewalk, and even then, root barriers are kind of iffy. Your best bet, instead of using a root barrier, is to choose a tree that works for that area. Especially if you're planting a tree right next to a sidewalk, you want to choose a tree that does not have a problem with invasive roots. And so that is the mailbag. And I have another video of our tours. We're going on some more tours of local area gardens. And this video is to Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. Let me tell you a little bit about Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. They specialize in native plants. They specialize in native plants, and they do a lot of basic botanical research. It's quite an institution. So, without further ado, let's go to the Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. I'm here with Barbara Eisenstein, who's Horticultural Outreach Coordinator for Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. Barbara, how you doing today?
I'm fine. Nice day.
It is. It's gorgeous. Now, we're at Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. Tell me what's different about this botanic garden compared to others here in Southern California.
Well, I think Rancho Santa Ana's had a very interesting history. The garden began in 1927. It was started by a woman named Susanna Bixby Bryant. And she was interested in having a garden dedicated to California native plants. And that's a very unique thing. And it was especially unique in 1927. I think somebody in her family, or maybe even Susanna, said that she wanted it to be a California sanctuary, a sanctuary for California native plants. She wanted to have a collection of plants from all over the state.
Now, since it's moved from Orange County, tell me how it's changed and what do you do here now?
Well, the garden has changed quite a lot. We have 86 acres, and that encompasses our living collection. But we also have, I guess, what you could think of as our dead collection, which are our pressed plants that are in the herbarium, and we have roughly 1 million specimens up there. We have a botanical library. We do botany research and have the educational program, the graduate program for the Claremont Graduate Universities here. And we have horticultural outreach to engage the public and educate them on using California native plants in their gardens.
Well, speaking of which, you have a program to introduce plants into horticulture, correct?
Yes, we do. Over the years, and this has gone on for many years, initially we worked with some of the large plants, like the ceanothus and the manzanitas, and we selected ones that were interesting for whatever reason. They were larger, they flowered more, whatever reason they were interesting. In more recent years, some of our selections have had more to do with finding plants that will do well in gardens, because a lot of California native plants are very large. They may grow very quickly. They do various things that are not easily adapted to a garden situation.
They just don't scale well.
They don't scale well, correct. So we sometimes go out there looking for small specimens, and we may look for them and find them in the wild, and they'll be natural hybrids. Or other times we find them in the garden where two plants that would not normally be together are, and a hybrid pops up. We're really experimenting with them, so we're not necessarily developing them as just trying things that we didn't try before. So like right over here, you'll see a ceanothus, another one of these California lilacs. This is a very beautiful one because it has the variegated leaves. People don't usually think of putting it in a pot and having it spill over, and take a look at the effect there.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Look at that.
Yeah.
What's your favorite of these? I mean, what are you rooting for? Which plant of these group do you hope makes it?
I can answer that right. You didn't ask me this before. I can answer it right off the bat.
What is it?
I would like to see some of the manzanitas make it. And that's a hard one because these plants typically get very large. They do have large root systems, but the stem can be so architectural and so beautiful and tactile that I'd love to see them work in a pot.
Like a bonsai, huh?
Like a bonsai, yes.
Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the results of these studies. It's fantastic. And this is the place that they can find out all about the container plants, check the plants, and see how they're doing here at the container plant section.
That's correct.
Great. Welcome back to Gardens of California. I'm Frank McDonough from the Arboretum of Los Angeles County, and we were just visiting Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Gardens. And if you noticed in there, the What Is It plant was mentioned. That was actually given, it was a gimme right there. So if you were paying attention, you got the name of the What Is It plant, and you can call in. 1-800-339-1193, 1-800-339-1193. Now, like I was saying earlier on, if you want to impress your friends, I have some plants I'm going to show you in a little bit that are going to impress them and make them feel like they're in a botanic garden. So, before I do that, though, I do have a phone call, so I'm going to take the phone call right now. Yes, caller, go ahead. Ann, how you doing?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I wanted to know that plant that's next to you now. Is that a clivia?
Yes, that is. It's a clivia.
We tuned in late, and we were just beginning to see what was happening on the program. And I didn't know if that was your mystery plant today.
Oh, no, the mystery plant's right here.
Yeah, I saw that after you started talking, but I called in real quick because I thought that was a clivia next to you, and I thought that was the plant. But I missed out this week.
Have you ever grown, Ann, have you ever grown clivias?
No, I've never grown clivia.
They're actually really easy. They're, they're almost, I wouldn't call them weeds because they don't spread like weeds. They kind of keep to themselves, but they are just easier than heck to grow. They bloom at this time of year is when they're blooming. Now, what's different with this one? This is yellow. Yellow's not a very common color.
No, it's rare.
Very rare. And I got this. This is from Burkhardt Nurseries in Pasadena. Thank you, Burkhardt's. And it's just an exceptional plant. If you look at the flowers there, it's a really nice kind of a yellowy color.
Yeah.
And, yeah, beautiful plant. And I would recommend anybody try these out. They like partial shade to almost full shade as long as it's bright around the house. And most of them, now this one's a little taller, but most of them are going to be a little shorter than this and wider leaves. But they're really excellent plants, and they're very hardy plants too.
Yeah, it's very, very lovely, very lovely.
And if this was part of my demo about plants that would really impress your friends, make them think.
I like impressing folks.
This will do it. This will do it. This is not only is it rare, but it just kind of catches you as you go by and you look at it. And this is one of the plants that you want to put in your garden to impress your friends and make them think that you are running a botanic garden in your own house. So that's it right there. Anyway,
thank you very much.
Thanks for calling, Ann.
Bye-bye.
You bet. 1-800-339-1193. 1-800-339-1193. And again, this is a clivia. It's fairly rare yellow clivia, and very impressive. This is one of the plants I'm going to show you that if you want to impress your friends and make them think that you have a botanic garden, you can grow in your yard. Another plant that's really neat, just reeks of botanic garden, is this one. And it looks like I have a phone call. Yes, Dean, go ahead. Dean from Pacific Palisades?
Scale in my greenhouse, and was wondering if there's any sort of organic control for the scale, mostly on staghorn ferns and fancy-leafed anthuriums.
Well, have you tried horticultural oil?
No, I have not.
There's there's a type of oil called sun spray. And there's different grades of horticultural oil. For most gardening purposes, the difference doesn't matter. But when you're dealing with greenhouse plants, you want to get something that's very fine and doesn't stick around a long time. And one of the brands that I know of for sure that's fairly fine type of oil and will be fairly easy on the plants is one called sun spray.
Well, super.
So give that a try. Also, make sure before you even go and buy the stuff, you can look up labels on the internet. There are several different sites that have the labels. Make sure that your plant's listed on there. Sometimes I think ferns may not be listed for oil sprays.
Okay.
But check it out. If you can't go with an oil spray on your ferns, you might want to try, there's a product called neem oil. It's kind of a general insecticide and it works on a lot of different things. You might want to check out neem oil too.
Well, super. Great. Thank you very much.
Good luck. All right. 1-800-339-1193. If you have any gardening questions, I have another question. Yes. Go ahead, caller. Tim, how you doing, Tim?
How you doing?
I'm doing great.
I got 2 wisterias from the plant sale at the Huntington Gardens, and we transplanted them into the ground for an arbor.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, they both dropped, over the winter, all their leaves.
Right.
But and one of them is showing a lot of flowering right now, but the other one isn't.
Okay.
And it seems like they're both leaving very well. They're climbing. They've rebounded. So is there any suggestion you have?
Are these are 2 different varieties?
No, they're both black dragon.
Oh, they're both black dragon. And they pretty much look the same? I mean, there's no difference between the way the plants look? One's not older than the other?
Well, I really don't know. They both look like the same size in terms of stalk size and their trunk size.
Mm-hmm.
But they were, one of them came out. They both leaves rather quickly after the spring. From what I read in the Sunset Gardening book, March is their time of the year to really start to bloom.
What kind of sun were these both getting? The same amount?
They're in full sun now.
Full sun? How about irrigation? Were they getting the same amount of irrigation?
Yes, they were.
So there's nothing different between the 2?
There's nothing different between the 2. I put them in the ground. I fed them, and I've been feeding them this spring as well. And so they certainly have rebounded rather nicely. It's just that one is blooming and the other one isn't.
Did you cut back any of the 2 at all?
No, we didn't. I read in the Guardian Sunset that it said to new transplants, let them establish themselves, and then maybe a little later in the year begin to trim back stalks and pull the buds off where you want to train it.
Right.
So I wanted to leave it for a while before I started to trim it back.
Well, I got to tell you, in fact, this is the first year they've been in, right?
Yes.
You're lucky to get them to bloom the first year, so you're just kind of lucky.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, usually you want to give them about 3 to 4 years before you start worrying whether or not they have bloom or not.
Okay. Now they are black dragons. I was under the assumption that they were going to be fairly dark purple blooms, but they turned out to be, well, they were dark purple at the very beginning, but then they're going a little lighter, more lavender.
Yeah, it could be because they're bleaching out in the sun. It's tough to say. It's tough to say. I'm not familiar with black dragon, that particular variety. But I know that with those flowering vines, that you've got to give them some time to come in before you start expecting anything out of them. And the fact that you got one blooming the first year, that's pretty good.
So it's pretty happy.
Yeah. Actually, I'd pat yourself on the back for that one, actually.
Okay, great.
All right, Tim.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for calling.
You bet. Bye.
1-800-339-1193. 1-800-339-1193. And we're looking at plants to impress your friends and make them think that you have a botanic garden in your backyard. This is one of them right here. Look at that sucker. Now, does that say botanic science or what? It almost doesn't look like a plant. This is Aeonium Schwarzkopf. Now, I'll tell you something. If you can learn to pronounce that name and spill it in front of your friends like that, they will be very impressed. Not just by the plant, but by your pronunciation of Latin as well. So take a look. That's Aeonium Schwarzkopf, which roughly translates into the blackhead aeonium. The blackhead aeonium. Put this one in partial shade. I've seen this in full sun. They will get a little blacker, but they also tend to burn. So partial shade is best. And they flower. They have beautiful yellow flowers. They won't flower the first year on these either. And what else do we have here? This is an interesting plant. This is the butterscotch bulbine. And here's the scientific name. That's bulbine or bulbine, depending on which branch of Latin I guess you're in. No, bulbine frutescens. And it is a South African plant. Take a look at that. Beautiful flowers on that. And good cut flower too, good cut flower. So South African plants, by the way, do very well in Southern California because our climates are fairly similar. Such California standards as freeway daisies and gazanias are all from South Africa, as is this butterscotch bulbine. And finally, and I've had this one on the show before, this is a Kalanchoe baharensis. It's a Kalanchoe from Bahrain. Now, saying the word Kalanchoe itself is a botanical feat, but baharensis, with that, that's really neat. So you have this very beautiful plant, interesting looking, very velvety plant. Just, if you want to impress your friends, get yourself a Kalanchoe baharensis. Now, I have another phone call. Yes, caller, go ahead. Hi. Connie?
Yes.
How you doing today?
Yes. I'm doing fine.
What can I do for you?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One is about baby tears.
Okay, go ahead.
I had a 100-foot wide bank of baby tears that I started from a 4-inch plant, and it spread, and it was absolutely gorgeous. It was a north-facing bank with some orange trees, a few orange trees at the top of the bank.
Okay.
And it did well. In fact, it did beautifully for many years. But last year, all of a sudden, I just lost it.
When did you lose that?
And
do you remember the exact time?
I don't know if there's any specific problems for baby tears, or how, I don't know how to treat them.
Connie, what was the exact time you lost them? What month was it?
Would you repeat that? I could hardly hear.
Yeah, Connie, what month did you lose the baby tears in? When did they disappear?
Well, it started each year. Sometimes I would get a little area of black.
Okay.
But it would always come back. But
right.
This year, it just seemed to have died. I saw some little tiny snail-looking things in the baby tears. I was wondering if it's a pest that would destroy them.
What I'm trying to do, Connie, is trying to figure out exactly when...
I can hardly hear you.
What I'm trying to do is find out exactly when this damage happened. Did it happen during the winter time? Did it happen in the last 3 or 4 months?
It didn't seem to... It seemed to happen at various times.
Uh-huh. Okay, that's what's probably going on is you're getting some rot, root rot to be particular, and it's most commonly Phytophthora. What I would do, yeah, Phytophthora, that's our kelp gone bad friend.
I have a problem. At the top of the bank, we have an orange grove.
Right.
And the orange trees are very old, but they've done beautifully through the years until a couple of years ago when I over-fertilized with urea, and I think I damaged the trees very badly.
Well, you know, let me just tell you something. Orange trees and baby tears don't go together. Baby tears require more water than the orange trees like.
Just a minute. Let me turn the volume down a little.
Sure.
Now.
Okay, just really quickly, because we're coming up on the end of the program.
Yes.
What you're probably looking at is Phytophthora root rot, but you want to make a decision because you really don't, those two plants aren't compatible. Citrus trees and baby tears aren't compatible because the amount of water it takes to keep the baby tears going is going to be bad for the citrus.
Yes.
So you have to make a decision whether you want to keep your citrus or your baby tears.
Yes.
If you decide to keep the baby tears, try some Alliette or some Agrifos on that. If you decide to keep the citrus, do the same because they're having the same problem. Try the Agrifos on the citrus.
What was that product?
Agrifos or Alliette. Anyway, Connie, I've got to go. We're getting toward the end of the show, but thanks for calling. And
I'm really worried about the orange trees, and I'm hoping there's a way to bring them back.
Okay, stay on the line, and we'll get your number, and I'll call you back later on during the week, okay?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, great. Anyway, we're coming up on the end of the show. I just want to let everybody know that we will not be here for the next 2 weeks. We have 2 holidays to take. We are back live Sunday, April 15th, and we'll be taking, of course, all your gardening questions. Nobody got the, what is it? It is a ceanothus. It is a ceanothus, a new variety of ceanothus, variegated, and it was in the Rancho Santa Ana video. If you looked at some of the plants they were trying for containers, they had a low-growing ceanothus, and this is a variegated variety. It's a cultivar. It's not available in the wild. So that's what the what is it was. Nobody got it this week, but 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, you'll be able to try again here on Gardens of California. And until next time, goodbye and good gardens.